Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel where I talk about vinyl records. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the 1980s. Now, a lot of people my age have 80s parties, and today we're going to talk about 10 albums I picked out of the collection that are going to be great for your 80s parties. Just about every year of the decade is represented here. Not quite, but let's get started. First, 1980. Joan Jett, Bad Reputation. This is a good one here. I mean, you got Bad Reputation, Do You Want to Touch, Let Me Go, Don't Abuse Me. She covers Wooly Bully. She does a few covers on here. And, yeah, I mean, great punk rock album. She is the queen of punk rock. It's hard to believe this album came out in 1980. It sounds awesome still today. Doesn't even sound like the 80s, really, but this one does. This is from 1981. The Go-Go's, Beauty and the Beat. This has the 80s sound written all over it here. We got The Beat, Our Lips Are Sealed, Automatic, Can't Stop the World. Bunch of great songs on here. And definitely a classic 80s album. This will get your 80s party going. From 1982, another person you think of, well, maybe when you think of the 80s, John Mellencamp. Was he still the Cougar? Yeah, John Cougar Mellencamp still on this album. And yeah, this is a classic. This album's called Crumbling Down, Pink Houses, The Authority Song, Play Guitar, Serious Business. This is a great album at any time, but it's gonna work great at your 80s party. Mellencamp always goes good with the 80s. Now we're skipping ahead a year to 1984. So many good records came out in 1984. There's going to be a few. First, of course, Van Halen, 1984. You knew this would probably be on here. Jump, Panama, Hot for Teacher. If you watched MTV in 1984, 1985, you saw those videos a bunch. And yeah, it's a great album. It's going to be an awesome hit at your 80s party, I promise you. And again, another one, if you lived through the 80s, you probably knew this was coming. Prince, Purple Rain. You gotta have Prince at your 80s party. This is a classic here. Let's Go Crazy, When Doves Cry. Of course, the title track, legendary. But yeah, pretty much every song on here was popular. If not a hit, it was popular. And yeah, great album, classic 80s album. I think it probably won some Grammys back in the day, back in the 80s. Alright, skipping ahead to 86. See, by this point in the night, the party's probably picking up some. It's time to throw on Master of Puppets for the metalheads at your 80s party. This is a thrash rock metal classic. You got Battery, Master of Puppets, Leper Messiah, Sanitarium. What needs to be said about Master of Puppets? This album's awesome. Skipping ahead here to 1987. Document, REM. Another classic 80s band, 80s album. Well, they weren't really an 80s band. They continued through the 90s and were popular for a long time. I think of them as an 80s band, I guess, because I kind of grew up with these guys. And yeah, classic 80s album here. Finest Work song. It's The End of the World as We Know It. The One I Love. Probably remember all those songs from the 80s if you're around my age. And oh boy, here's a classic 80s album. Kick, In Excess. This is classic 80s here. I mean, if you watched MTV in the 80s, you saw plenty of these videos here. I mean, this is legendary. This is almost a greatest hits album with all the hits on here. New Sensation, Devil Inside, Need You Tonight, Never Tear Us Apart, Mystify. I think all those were top 10 hits. What a classic album here. Up next, from 1988, Surfer Rosa by the Pixies. One of my favorite albums here. Maybe not as well known as the others. I don't know. A lot of people should like the Pixies. If they don't, But yeah, this is a classic here, one of my favorites. And finally, 1989, the Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique. Man, you could go with License to Ill, their debut, but this is what a follow-up here. I mean, this album, groundbreaking. The way they recorded it, the samples. There's a whole documentary about how they made this album. It's amazing. The work they did on this album. And Hey Ladies is on here. Johnny Ryell, a bunch of good songs. The Eggman, the Sounds of Science. This will definitely go over great at your 80s party. So anyway, there's 10 albums that you can play at your 80s party. It's going to be fun for everybody. I'm Brian. This is the show where I talk about records. So if you're into that, you can subscribe if you want, or like, leave a comment, whatever, and I'll see you next week.